whatever you're going to do, whatever your next job is, whatever you got to go do at work that day, or your schoolwork, or that paper that you're dreading to write, that conversation that you're dreading to have with a parent or a significant other or friend or whatever the hard thing is, or even whatever the good things are, go attack it.
Joining the show this week, I have longtime friend from high school and college. We played high school football together and college football together for 2 years at Ohio Wesleyan. Cam Smith. Cam Smith is the current head coach of the Danville Blue Devils, where he also helps coach softball as well as helping out with strength and conditioning. He also is a teacher for the Danville Blue Devils, and I'm very excited to have him on this week. Cam Smith, welcome to the Roughnecks podcast for episode 12, or should I say Mr. Smith now, or Coach Smith, considering you're now an adult in the world of teaching, coaching, and even married to Jordan, who's an incredible person who I might actually want on this podcast in the future. We go a long way back from playing high school ball together and hanging out every Friday night after games with Trace and Kang, who we just talked about a little bit before doing this. And now I'm good, and we got the opportunity to play a couple of years of college football together at Ohio Wesleyan. Now we're sitting here on a podcast, and you're starting your career, and I'm about to venture into that world, but I still got a little bit. But you're now about a whole year into that. So let's start. Give me a little background on yourself, where you're from, and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me. Some background. You kind of mentioned it a little bit. I played football with you at Watkins Memorial, and then later at Ohio Wesleyan, 4 years there. And so football-wise, that's kind of my background. You know what? With football and teaching, that kind of seems like it's it. And that seems like when people ask about me and ask about my background, that's kind of where I stop. And when you kind of brought me on to this and told me about this and said that's where you're going to go with it and whatnot, and I said there's a million ways I could go, but you know what? With these kind of topics, kind of that's about it. Went to Watkins, played football there, and I was on the baseball team. I joke I didn't really play much. We had a pretty good team, and I knew football was my sport already, so I knew my place. I was a role player.
You played with some very talented people in that baseball team.
Yeah, exactly.
One of which is now I believe in the MLB.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, he didn't get drafted straight out of high school as high as he would have liked, so he played at Vanderbilt for
the
a few
most
years.
Prestigious college baseball team. Which, in fact, if you didn't know, the baseball, I believe it's the head coach, if not a coach on the Vanderbilt baseball team, is an Ohio Wesleyan alum.
Really? Good
Yes,
connections. Look at that.
I saw,
small world.
Yeah, it is. So you said you went to Ohio Wesleyan. Like we talked about, you went to Ohio Wesleyan. We played at Ohio Wesleyan. Why did you end up choosing to go to Ohio Wesleyan?
I was between mainly Ohio Wesleyan, Audubon, and Mount Union. And I liked the coaching staffs at all three, and I liked the schools at all three. But, it was just a feeling when I got there, just from the players that were there on like my overnight visit and stuff like that, and the coaches and the way they talked to me and stuff like that. And like Coach Bo always jokes with me that I never answered my phone and things like that. And he felt like he was always bugging me and stuff like that.
Hold on. Coach Bo never answers his phone either.
Well, don't I know it? Oh my goodness. But yeah, so he always jokes about that. And so there was this balance of like, they would contact me a lot and stay in close contact without like overwhelming me and bugging me like some of those coaches did. And so I don't know, it just kind of felt like home, and I felt like, hey, this is where it feels right. And so that's what I told my buddies. And like when you came to stay on a visit, I told you the same thing. Like, hey, if you're looking elsewhere, like if that place feels good, like go to that place. Like you have to go and experience it, at least obviously what you can in a couple of nights, and then you just choose from there.
I mean, I committed on my overnight visit in your room is when I officially committed. But you're right. Like this isn't a pitch towards Ohio Wesleyan, but like there is something about Ohio Wesleyan. Like when you get on campus and like when you're around the players, you're around the coaches, you're around that culture, like that's just something like it's very easy to connect with, and you feel like a part of it even when you're not yet. So like even before you're a part of the team, you feel like you're a part of that team, and that was ultimately one of the things too that drove me there. And you were one of the reasons that drove me there too, because you were texting me all the time as well, even though you were like, yeah, everybody else sounds good, but listen, Ohio Wesleyan over here is where you should be.
Right. We were a little better at least, right? Hey, I started my recruiting there early. I can't do it now here in high school, but Joe and they always joke that I try to recruit them for coaching at least, and hey, come over and coach with me.
Hell, you've texted me like 6 times about it.
Oh, I know it. Hey, I was probably going to tell you again during this podcast. So.
I figured. So go back in time. What is your favorite memory? We'll go with 2 different sides. We'll go like just socially or academically your favorite memory from Ohio Wesleyan, and then we'll go with your favorite football memory.
Well, I probably have to say let's stray from academics and football for a minute. Actually, on my recruiting visit, I met my now wife, Jordan. And so that obviously has to be a pretty good memory there. Obviously, nothing happened on that recruiting visit. I was still a high schooler, but it felt really cool just to talk to her on that visit. She seemed really interested in football and asked me details and asked about my life and things like that. And all these other schools, people were really friendly, which was great. And they'd ask, hey, how you doing? Like, where are you from? All this stuff, like what position you play. But she really sat down for a few minutes and actually asked some questions and got past kind of the small talk or whatever. So something just felt different about that. And later, obviously, since I ended up going there the next year, she was a sophomore and I was a freshman. Then we started actually talking and obviously therefore dating. And so obviously that's a pretty good memory there. Football wise, I got a couple good ones. One was just, I would have been a sophomore and we were up late in the game by a couple scores, and so I got to go in and we did our ammo blitz, which is both backers inside the box blitzing, and I got through and got a varsity sack on pretty much my first real varsity snap, really, other than special teams, and so that was fun. And then at Hiram, my junior year, I scooped and scored a fumble for a touchdown, ran it in for a touchdown. And it was funny on film, you can see I almost tripped pretty much over nothing as I was trying to scoop it, maybe 3 steps after the scooping the ball. But so everyone made fun of me.
It's also on the Wild Bill video.
Scored, so. Oh, yes. It was always in Wild Bill highlights and stuff. So, of course, people tried to make fun of me and tease me for it. I mean, that's what friends do, of course. But I scored, and so that was really fun. That was a great memory. Oh. And I joke with my dad because he did not miss very many football games. I think that's one of 2 football games he's ever missed in my career, and that was one of them. So,
I think I can relate to that. I'm pretty sure my first career interception, none of my family besides my parents, because you know me, I have a bigger family, and like all my siblings, all my nieces and nephews come, and I'm pretty sure my first interception at Ohio Wesleyan, I'm pretty sure just my mom and dad were there, and I don't even think my mom was in the stands. So it was – my mom also is never usually in the stands. She gets very antsy during football games for some reason. She always has to like go out beyond in the parking lot and watch from there. But so going off of that, I think I know the answer to this. It's probably simple after you talked about meeting your wife.
Right.
If you could go back, would you still go to Ohio Wesleyan?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot of factors that go into that. Looking back at it in hindsight from right now, yeah, absolutely. Obviously there's a lot of things that went right. I basically got this job because of Ohio Wesleyan and a connection from there from OU football. Like you just mentioned, I met my wife from there and met quite a few good friends from there. And so obviously it ended up really great and couldn't ask for anything different from that experience. But yeah, I joke with my players all the time. Like, yeah, if I was 3 inches taller or something and a tenth of a 40 times faster, then maybe I could have gone D1 or something. And of course, that's mostly joking anyway, but obviously that would make my life look a lot different. So with a lot of other schools I was looking at, whether to play football or not, I'm happy with the way it turned out. So absolutely, I would get back.
Now I'm going to kind of like base this off of what you said. And it's one of my thoughts I've always thought about. And I want to see what you kind of think about it. Like, you look at it, I feel like the D3 world is overlooked sometimes because people think, I want money to go play this sport. Mm-hmm. And honestly, like, I do not regret going to Ohio Wesleyan, going to a small D3 college at all. And what are your thoughts on, like, why, I guess, do you think people should consider D3 and why?
Oh, absolutely. And especially just if you love the game and you want to keep playing, that's definitely an option. Like you said, obviously it'd be nice to get paid for what you do and get paid for doing something you love, whether that's obviously later in the pros, theoretically you could get paid if you're that good. But even, scholarship money or whatnot, that'd be nice. And so if you're that good and you can do that, great, good for you. But I think D3 gets overlooked a lot, but it's still real football. Like, that's college football in D3. I think we counted the hours before. It's a full-time job, man. Like, there's over 40 hours put in a week. Not that there probably isn't in high school too, but yeah, even D3 is like, that's a different animal. And so it's real football, and you got to be passionate about the game. Of course, though, there's pros and cons to everything you do. And I tell my students and my players all the time, there's choices and there's consequences. And some of those consequences are good and some are bad. And again, there's good and bad that comes out of everything. And so you got to choose what's going to be the best for you and kind of roll with whatever happens.
So now you moved on to the teaching world after Ohio Wesleyan. What subject do you teach?
I teach world history, which is freshmen, and government, which is juniors. And then I have an elective period. Right now it is global issues, and the next semester it will be it's called crime and punishment in modern America. So
what made you decide to be a teacher? Like, because ultimately, like, everybody has that one decision that made them choose the major, choose their career choice, maybe in college, maybe before college. What was it that made you decide teaching?
Sure. Yeah, I actually wasn't going into college for teaching yet. Now I switched it pretty early. I switched it in freshman year. Because that's kind of when I realized. And I wanted to do something with politics and government in some way, probably federal law enforcement in some way. Obviously, my dad is law enforcement, and he basically said, no, you're not being a city cop. Like, go do something bigger. And
speaking of your dad, you think
they're gonna treat you better. But
you think your dad would do a podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. You talk to him.
I thought about doing the
if you can find the time in his schedule.
Hey, I don't care if it's 3 a.m, or I don't care if it's 6
Well, that's when he'd be working, but
yeah, I know he's always usually at night doing things.
Oh, I know. But yeah, he'd probably be on. But yeah, so I was gonna do that probably, but quickly realized that I wanted to keep doing football, and I had known that I wanted to coach in general anyway. But when I started playing at Ohio Wesleyan, I realized pretty quickly, I was like, yeah, I need to keep this in my life. Like, I can't not have football, and I want to coach, and I want to influence young minds. And so I was really involved with Young Life as well, which is a high school ministry. And so those two combined, and then I have a lot of teachers in my family. And so all of those factors kind of just made me realize, like, hey, why don't you teach? You love doing that already. That's kind of what coaching is in anyway, is teaching these kids how to play the game and how to grow up into young men. And so, yeah, it just pairs really well together, teaching and coaching. And so that's kind of the main push and drive that put me into that. And then it was just a pretty easy transition too with my academics anyway. So
you said you originally went in as politics and government?
Yeah. So political science. I think OU called it politics and government. They didn't actually have, because we have Bachelor of Arts, and we don't have any Bachelor of Science or whatever. Yeah, something like that. But so same thing.
So you chose like the high school grade level, I guess you want to call it, for teaching.
Sure.
What was your thought process on that? Like, why did you want to go to the high school compared to like middle school or elementary first off, no offense, I couldn't see with elementary kids. I feel like you just want to like strangle them. Not necessarily strangle them, but you're just you're definitely more of an authority figure compared like with because of your dad and how you are similar to your dad, but you're more of the authority figure. So what made you go towards high school instead of younger?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't know if maybe everyone agrees, but no, I actually taught preschool for my 4 years at Ohio Wesleyan. I worked at the ECC there on campus.
Oh, wow.
Which I loved my experience there, and wouldn't trade that.
I've heard everything.
That was part of my teaching experience. So
I've never heard anything bad about ECC. Everything, like everybody loves their
it's a great program
at ECC.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so no, I would definitely do, and in fact, Jordan and I have talked about if I do go back for a master's and go into administration at all or something, I would take a look at the possibility of being like an elementary school teacher or principal, I mean. And so I don't know, that's a thought for way later down the road. But anyway, so yeah, with high school, like I said, when I kind of started getting into teaching anyway, again, I was involved in a high school ministry and I was already involved in some of those local high schoolers' lives and helping them with football and other sports and in the weight room and stuff like that. And kind of already getting into that groove of teaching them and coaching them and mentoring them anyway. And so I talked about already that it was an easy transition. And so that was the easiest transition, was just into high school. And you said you don't see me as elementary. I'd be great in elementary. Middle school is the one. Those are the ones I would try.
Okay.
I can't do middle school.
Middle school is usually when they're like, they don't care what you tell them to do something and they'll look at you like, okay, whatever.
Oh goodness. Well, and which I have freshmen and I joke with some of the other teachers, especially like this year, I joked with a couple of the new teachers that I was like, freshmen are still middle schoolers. First semester freshmen are still middle schoolers.
Oh, 100%.
After they come back from Christmas break, they're not so bad, but it's a little rough.
Well, it's what's crazy is you listen to what people tell you, like, oh, like the older timers tell you things, but then you get to the point, like I look at myself now, and as I was even a senior in high school, and I'm like, I was a jackass. Like, yeah. Wow. Like,
I was an idiot.
I still had a lot of growing up to do.
Oh, yeah.
And
I mean, a lot of these things will happen in my classroom or on the field or in the locker room or something. Some of these conversations with my kids, and I'll look at some of my other coaches or the teachers that are around, and I'll be like, did I do this to my coaches? Like, did I do this to my teachers? I need to like apologize to them because what is going on? And yeah, so it's funny. Exactly. You just look back and like, was I that dumb? Like, wow.
Yeah.
But no, I love my kids and they're great, but yeah, it's funny. Some of the things you just like, man, what did I do this in high school? Are you serious?
So,
or even in college, I'm like, dang, Coach D probably thought I was so dumb. Like,
at one point in your career, Coach D looks at you and thinks you were the dumbest person there is.
Oh, absolutely. I think between me, Smoz, like Joe and Colton and kind of that group, and I think he told us all at least once, like, you were one of the dumbest smart kids I've ever known. Like
that, or you dumb shit. Like that.
Oh yeah, dumb shit.
He always says dumb shit. I want to talk a little. Speaking of Coach D, I want to talk a little bit about coaching. But first, man, I got to congratulate you on being the Coach of the Year in your conference, along with 7 of your players, I believe, being named first team all conference. What's crazy is you're just 24 years old.
Yeah, 24. Now, Coach of the Year, that was that was from the Mount Vernon newspaper. So for the all area and then the radio station did one, but not the conference because I was voted on by coaches. So I did not get that one, but I appreciate
that's still an honor because of the fact that, like,
absolutely,
people see you as something, and you're a first-year head coach. And
for sure, I'm not complaining. I just wanted to clarify so that nobody thought I was trying to claim something. Yep.
So either way, you're a first-year head coach, gaining some accolades. So what was it? Where did you kind of touched on a little bit with, like, you kind of chose your career based on teaching or coaching a little bit, but what was it that made you want to get into the coaching world?
Just my dad coached me growing up in Little League football and baseball and stuff. And I think a lot of us, our dad probably did. at least a lot of us that are really involved with sports. And yeah, I don't know. He just instilled in me a passion and discipline for both the game and just competition in general. And yeah, I just developed a passion for the game of football, especially, but just yeah, man, I love competitions. I joke with the kids, like when they say they want to play video games or just one-on-one basketball or something, and so I'll play against them, and I'm like, listen, man, you might be a lot better than me, but I freaking hate losing. Like, let's go. And so that's part of it, is just that drive, and man, I love just being around that competition and just sports in general, but also kind of same thing with the teaching and doing Young Life and things like that, is just, man, mentoring these kids and showing and using the game of football to teach life lessons and show these kids how to grow into young men, and then and any kids, right? Obviously, it's softball or these other sports, right? And same thing on the other side, but yeah, just mentoring them and into becoming good adults, essentially.
I mean, yeah, you go beyond just a football coach. You're more than just a football coach. You also are what? A softball coach, JV softball as well, right? Are you still doing
Yeah,
that?
so I help with the softball team. My defensive coordinator on football, he convinced me last year. He said, "Hey, I need a JV coach," and obviously when we don't have JV games, I'll be helping with varsity too, because we kind of all practice together anyway. It's like he's like, I need somebody. You play baseball, right? Come on. You can help. He just kept egging me on, kind of like I do with you and Joe and a bunch of you guys. And I started getting on Weege too, so that's fun.
There we go.
But yeah, he just got on me. He's like, "Hey, come on, come coach," and he just stayed over. And I'm like, "All right, let's do it. I can do it." And then I was also already getting a spot as like getting an extra stipend for an assistant weightlifting coach. And then when our head football coach left schools, he was that head weightlifting coach spot as well. And so I took that over this year as well. And so I wrote a program for the volleyball this summer. And so obviously I already helped with softball. And so I got really involved with those sports, and obviously football. And we'll start working with these other sports too as well. Danville doesn't have near as many as Watkins, but
yeah,
it's fun getting to see the different dynamics and working with different sports, and it's funny too the different dynamics between girls and boys in the weight room. It's funny. The girls are not nearly as confident, but in some ways that's almost a good thing. They're very teachable in that sense because they don't think they know everything.
What do you mean,
high school
man?
guys
Walk in that weight room, I know exactly what the hell I'm doing.
Right, exactly. You come in and you throw 315 on that bar and you try to throw it up there and grunt and do whatever you need to do and take your shirt off and all this other stuff. And the girls are like, "Coach Smith, what do I do? Like, what do you want? What weight do you want me to put on? Like, how do I do this?" Like, they're all ready for it. And so that's really fun to see. And there's good and bad about everything. And so it's just interesting to see those dynamics. And so I think my coaching experience with softball has helped develop me as a better coach in general, and just better leader to coach the football team as well. So I think that experience has helped me in that aspect.
We're going to just focus a little more on football now. You kind of took the scheme, as far as I know, a little bit from the Ohio Wesleyan side. Why is that? Is it because you know it, or because you think it's good, or both?
Oh, absolutely both. Hey, do what you know, and get good at what you know. And that's what we tried to do with these kids too, is simplify the playbook, and so that they can get good at just a few things. I feel like I'm talking to another news reporter because I've said this maybe 6,000 times this season.
Hey, this basically is an interview.
Yeah, just get these kids. Well, yeah, fair enough. But yeah, get them good at a few things so that when they're out on the field, they don't have to think and get overwhelmed with, okay, what's my job? They know their job already, and so now they can fly around and go make plays. Because we got some good athletes, but just not letting them get overwhelmed. And so as a first year head coach at 24 years old, when you don't know much, you do what you know. And especially when what you know is that freaking good, because you had a pretty dang good defensive coordinator in college that knows a lot about football. Yeah, you do what you know. And so absolutely. It's very good. And obviously I simplified that. We don't do nearly as much as what Coach D did with us.
That's what I'm going to ask.
That's just a different level of football that these kids just wouldn't get yet. And that's fine. That's just part of the game that, man, we didn't know anything about that in high school either.
No, because I can remember back. I mean, don't get me wrong. Coach Warrington is a very good defensive coordinator, but I also look at some of the stuff he did. It was very simple. Now,
and the same concept we just talked about is coach simple, and therefore you play fast and win. I got that from a coaching podcast there, Joe Daniel Football. He's great. It's a great concept. I mean, if the kids don't have to think while they're playing, they're going to be in decent shape.
Oh yeah, that goes back. I talked about it with Cotter on episode 10. I said there was one piece of advice I got from my uncle when I started playing varsity football your senior year. He said, sometimes you read, think, and react. Stop doing that.
Just
stop,
read and react.
Like, stop thinking and just read and react.
Absolutely.
Let the game come to you. So, it all comes full circle.
Yes, it does. Always, right? Those life lessons in football.
We talked about this a little bit before the podcast, but I'm going to ask you the question now. You know there was skepticism out there, whether it was mentioned to you or not. First year head coach, you're 24 years old. You haven't had as much coaching experience as others. So what was it like? How did you handle that? Or did you even hear it, or did you even acknowledge it? What did you do with it?
No, you know what? I didn't really hear any. And really, if I did, I don't think I would really acknowledge it. I guess a lot of it was more on myself, like kind of just thinking like, hey, are you ready for this? Like there's a lot more that goes into this than just like coaching the safeties. Like there's a lot more into this than just like kind of just showing up and running with whatever practice plan there already is. And so just kind of like, hey, are you ready for this responsibility? Especially, I don't know how much you know about Danville, but man, it is a football town. They care about their football.
When you go out that direction, it's all football.
Oh, absolutely.
Farming and
these
football.
Small towns especially. Yep. They know their football, and they are tough and hard-nosed people, and the kids they're tough, and they play good football. And so there was high expectations. So I guess the biggest scrutiny would be and maybe this would be scrutiny, but also almost kind of a lower expectation. It was kind of a mixed feelings there, where we were coming off of kind of a couple of down years here, and especially this past year. And so kind of half the people were looking at these next classes and be like, all right, we need something to get us back. And then the other half was kind of like, well, we've kind of just not been good the last couple of years, so there's no really pressure. So, and I'm like, of course I set my expectations pretty high, and I'm like, no, we're gonna do some stuff, and we're gonna have some fun with it. And so yeah, I don't think I really acknowledged that, other than from myself, of that, hey, there's a lot that you got to do and step up, and a lot of habits you got to change about your own ways, and a lot more work that you got to do before you're ready for this. And so I kind of started interviewing just to do it and see what happens. And I was like, you know what, if I don't get it, obviously no hard feelings, and whoever steps in, hey, let's run with it. And I think one of the biggest draws to having me do that, especially during this COVID craziness and whatnot, this was my interview would have been right at the beginning of this in like March and April, was that I already knew the kids and had a relationship with the kids here over bringing an outside coach in. And so that was kind of the biggest factor in that decision with me taking over here. And I think it proved to be pretty good. I was able to kind of play to their strengths and kind of try to show them their weaknesses while giving them confidence in those strengths and kind of say like, hey, these are some things we're going to stick with and these are the things we're going to change. Because like I said, Danville's a good football town. It has great traditions, but there's some things that they got relaxed on in the last few years that I want to move around and do my own stuff with. So
kind of going off that, you kind of talked about like you already had the connection to your kids. I was going to ask like how you motivate your players, because let's be real, like there's probably been a point in our time in our life where we have a coach that we don't necessarily want to play for, like, but we play the game because we love it. And it is, you play the game 10 times harder, I think every football player or any sports athlete can agree to this. You play the game way harder if you want to play for that coach. So how do you necessarily motivate your players to play? Is it that connection that you try to build with them, or what is it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, I think one of the biggest things is, and I got this from Coach Schoen in baseball and obviously middle school football.
That's a Ohio baseball coach Hall of Fame right there.
Yes, sir. Yeah, exactly. Big guy, big name guy there. But yeah, he was great. And what I remember him being so great about was he would be lifting with us and he'd be out throwing the ball and hitting and doing different things, pitching. Obviously, I guess baseball is a little different in that sense where you're already they're throwing in the cage and things like that. But he just really seemed to, especially in the weight room, be doing the same stuff that he was asking us to do. And so that's something I've done a lot is I try to stay in shape and I try to run and lift and train with the kids. And basically I tell them like, hey, like, look, I can do this too. And I joke, of course, I'm old, fat, and retired, but whether I don't know.
You're a narc, a non-athletic retired person.
Yeah, exactly. But they don't realize that. But I'm like, hey, if I can do this, like, you'll be fine. You can make it through too. Like, let's do it together. And I think just that attitude of let's do it together has been hopefully really big. And it's just fun too. I have a lot of fun. At least I have a lot of fun lifting with them. Maybe they don't because they're like, dang, this dude's freaking crazy. He's an idiot. Like, shut up, Coach Smith. I don't know. And then the other thing is just that, just setting the expectations and giving those kids the confidence for that I think, man, after a down year or two, they just didn't really have the confidence to win. And especially there, again, with the overwhelming part and overthinking things and whatnot. And so we tried to just simplify stuff and say, hey, look, if we get good at this, like, we're going to have a shot. You give me effort and we got a shot. And I would say all the time, I would tell these kids all the time, like, Coach Smith could call the dumbest play in football history, but I got 11 dudes on the field that are willing to run through a brick wall for me, like, we got a shot. We're going to be in decent shape.
That's a Coach D saying right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Not directly, but like, yeah, it's similar to what Coach D says to us.
Yeah. I got a lot of sayings from him. Some
I got to bring him on the podcast.
Some I probably maybe shouldn't say, but
I got to bring him on the podcast because you are probably, I don't know, maybe the fifth person to bring.
I think everyone's mentioned him. Yep.
Yes. Like I'm not gonna lie. Every guest I've had on the podcast has been through Ohio Wesleyan, but that also goes to show the connections you get through Ohio Wesleyan. But I don't think people understand, like, if you go to Ohio Wesleyan and you want to play defense, you are playing for one of the smartest defensive coaches that you will ever meet.
But yeah, I mean, he's a super influential person, especially to all the guys who played and coached around him. He's a phenomenal leader outside of football already, but man, I joke with a lot of people that obviously don't know him, that when I'm talking about him, I say that man will probably forget more about the game of football than I will ever learn. And obviously that might be an exaggeration. I don't know, but man, he's smart. And so, yeah, he's super influential in that sense. So I got a lot from him. But yeah, so back to that is basically I tell him, like, I could call the worst play. Like, don't worry about the play call. Like, you just do it. Whatever it is, just go for it. And whatever happens. I said on the opposite end, I could call the best play in the world, but if anybody questions it, if there's one dude out there that's not going to do his job because he thinks he could do better or knows something different or doesn't want to give effort or whatever the circumstance is, if we don't got all 11 dudes doing that, then we're going to be in trouble. And so that's another big thing that I said. And kind of with that, I basically told him, like, look, last year wasn't very successful, right? Let's start to break down and think about all of these things that went wrong. And so I made them face those failures, but also not just face it and shameful, but also just like break down, okay, what was bad about this? Like, what didn't we like about this? And some of this I kind of just told them, and some I made them think for themselves and tell me, like, hey, coach, like, we didn't like when we did this, or we didn't like this part about practice or whatever. And so then we would start to talk through, okay, well, how do we fix that? What do you want to do different this year? And again, some I got from them and let them choose for themselves. And then some kind of just had to say, like, hey, here's the deal. But just looking forward and again, setting that expectation and saying, okay, with that, you said you want this. Here's the expectation. Here's one of the biggest things was no missing practices. I know a lot of things last year or the year before when I was here, in my first year as an assistant, there were lots of kids who just, oh, hey, coach, I'm not going to be there today. And it's like, well, why? It's like, well, I got this or this, or I'm spending time with family. It's like, dude, you have football practice. I was like, I don't know if I've ever missed one football practice in my life. I don't know. Maybe I missed one or two in high school or
I missed
maybe youth
one,
league or something.
And it was because
I don't remember missing any. Yeah,
I missed
exactly.
one because of a funeral. That was it.
Right. Right. There, every once in a while, there might be a good excuse. But I was like, here's the deal. Like, if you miss practice, like, okay, fine, you got to go to the doctor or whatever, you had a funeral. Like, you still missed stuff. Like, mental, we had probably installed plays, but physical, your whole team got better and was conditioning and stuff. You're going to have to make that up. And I said, don't look at it as a punishment. I'm not punishing you. I'm not mad at you. Like, stuff happens, life happens, but we got to make that up. And so just the accountability for that. But again, with that, not to just be like, oh, hard ass Coach Smith. Like, I just was like, here's the expectation. Like, you guys want to win, right? And we looked another thing I mentioned Joe Daniel football earlier. Another thing that I got from him is a big thing he said that stuck with me was no kid like wants to lose. No kid thinks they're not trying hard. Like, every kid when they go out on a Friday night thinks he's giving full effort. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to try to lose. And so it was basically the goal was the shift. We had to shift and show them, like, hey, here's the difference. Here's what you were doing, and here's what you like can be doing. And so just setting that expectation, like, hey, you want to win. Here's what we have to do that. And again, part of that was letting them try to decide some of that, and some is just like, hey, here's the freaking deal, dude. You got
there's a little line, like you got it. There's some stuff that goes this way and some stuff that goes the other way.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Do you have a game day routine? You're now a coach. You know, I've heard things with head coaches having game day routines. Do you have a game day routine? I know there's one thing that's probably true, and I always watched you since high school, and then into college, you walked into the locker room with a monster.
Yep. Yeah. So every game of football that I've ever played, starting in 5th grade, you can thank my father. Yeah, I have drank a monster, or a couple of times it may have been Bang or Rain or whatever. All
either way, like energy drink.
So, yeah, an energy drink. Typically, it was Monster, especially obviously you get your favorite. And that's the one. Yeah, so that was kind of just a tradition, good or bad. I'm not recommending it, good or bad, whatever. Like that, it just is what it is, and that was part of my thing.
Maybe not before a football game, maybe for a coach, it's whatever. But for a player, maybe not.
Yeah. Right. So exactly. I'm not recommending it to players. So if whoever's listening to this, don't do it. But yeah, that it is what it is. And that's what kind of got me in the zone there and kind of flipped the switch for me there on game days. So yeah, I still do that. I'll drink a monster in the locker room, and I usually finish it as I'm about to give kind of my pregame talk. Which isn't actually usually much. I kind of let my other coaches hype them up, and then I'll say my quick little piece, basically, hey, we know what we need to do. Let's go get it. And we do the Ric Flair.
You pull a Jeff Severino, huh?
Oh yeah. I don't say much there. I don't have many words for them. I yelled at them plenty throughout the week. They don't need to hear any more from me. But yeah, so that's one big thing. And then I got to take a nap too. I got to take a nap before the game at some point. Obviously that looks a little bit different coming from school. And I have to stay later a little bit as a teacher than I did as a student, obviously in high school, and then game days on Saturdays in college. Obviously that looks different, but in some way, whether it's 20 minutes or sometimes if it's on the bus, I'll sleep on the bus as well. So maybe 2 naps. But yeah, always got to take a nap. But it's not even a superstitious thing. I just know, I'm like, dang, I'm tired, dude. I need the energy.
The time
Because I'm typically
like,
I'm not very superstitious. Yeah, those are kind of probably the two main things. Other than that, I really don't, like I said, I'm not terribly superstitious. I don't really care.
What does the future of Cam Smith look like? 5 years, 10 years, 2 years, whatever you want to give. What do you got?
Well, coaching, obviously. We've talked a lot about what that means to me and what that's done for me and obviously why I want to. And so, yeah, coaching in some aspect. I don't know, there's quite a few different goals that I have. I would love to win a state championship. I think, like I said, with the expectations I set for the kids at the beginning of this year and that's kind of why we had some success is I set those high and all right, fine. If we fail and we make it to the third round of playoffs, like, darn, like that was a decent season, what do you get if you fail from setting those that high? You know what I mean? And so
you set the new bar.
I said those. Yeah.
You this year, you just set the new bar for next year. And I think that's what.
I've told the kids that, and we had a conversation in our kind of end of season meeting. I made them close their eyes and I said, raise your hand if you think realistically, like if you don't think this, be honest, this is fine. Like I'm not going to judge you. Like I want you to be real with yourself and with your teammates and nobody can see you except me right now. And I'm just asking, raise your hand if you think realistically we could compete and possibly win a state championship in the next year or two. And at least 8 out of 10 kids raised their hand. 80% of our kids raised their hand. I said, for those of you who not raising your hand, I want you to think about for a second, why not? And then I had them open their eyes and we talked about that a little bit, but yeah, I kind of set those expectations. I'm like, man, if you don't have this expectation, like if this goal isn't here, you're not getting it. Like there's not a chance, you know what I mean? And like I said, if you don't, like, okay, like darn, you still make it deep into playoffs and you still get some awards and you have a lot of freaking fun on the way. Like what is stopping us from setting that expectation? Because without that, like we're not going anywhere. So yeah, that's kind of one big thing I have. I think, man, a lot is I dream of different things and back and forth. And a lot of it though, I just, especially after COVID craziness and all this crap, it's a lot of it. I just go with the flow. And I joked with a lot of like news reporters that would ask me like, how's your first year coaching in amidst this pandemic and whatnot? I'm like, well, I don't really have an experience to compare it to.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of it's just like, I adjust on the fly. Like, hey, my AD says, hey, you can't do this. You got to switch to this. I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I don't know any different,
Yeah.
Obviously I had my experience as a player, but man, it's like, you just got to roll with the punches and you just go with it. And so I think I have a great family. I got a great wife and a lot of people that support me and care about me. And I got a lot of people that I care about and that I want to support. And so both of those things, I think whatever is going to happen, like I'm going to be good with, I'm going to be happy with. So other than that, I don't have a lot of specific, like, oh, in 5 years, I want this, you know what I mean? So
I like that better though. Like, cause honestly, like people, like, let's be real. You could plan for something in 5 years and 9 times out of 10, it's not what you're going to get in 5 years. Mm-hmm. So it's almost better to go with the flow. Now you should have goals. Don't get me wrong, but like,
right.
There's
exactly. Like I would love, and my goal is, okay, I do want to compete or get to the Final Four, get to the state championship, something like that, compete for state championship within the next 2 or 3 years. But right, it's hard to say like, okay, I want a wife and 4 kids and a house this size in this town within 5 years. Like that's like a hard plan to stick to and things like that. And exactly, that's the type of stuff like, okay, you just kind of roll with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the goals is like, okay, well, I want to coach. All right, well, I hit that. All right, well, I want our team to compete for state championship. All right, that's pretty measurable. Like,
Yeah.
You get back to me in 2 years and we'll talk about if I did that or not and why or why not. So,
and that goes off something that I think me and Chris Bonner might do another episode with me, the first episode of 2021, about like your goals need to be quantifiable. Don't make a goal like, I want to be a better person. Like, okay, yes, that's a good goal. Don't get me wrong. You have to be able to measure your goals.
absolutely.
And that was one thing I learned through Coach Watts, and when we would do our, what do they call them, leadership meetings or
leadership training.
Yeah. And like we would set our goals for our team the next year. Like your goals have to be able to be measured. Otherwise, how do you know if you even achieve those goals?
Right. And I've started doing the same thing with my kids. Heck, we just had a leadership training meeting a couple weeks ago, and we threw up kind of the same thing. Okay, what are a couple of our team goals, initial team goals? I said these are very, very versatile, I don't know what the word is, editable. That's not a word, but
like it doesn't mean
we can change these. These are written in pencil, right? Yeah. And so a lot of them, we want to be tough, right? Toughness is always one in football. Everyone wants to be considered tough. And exactly, okay, well, how do we be considered tough? What makes us tough, right? And especially, okay, well, if you're looking at just the defensive side, okay, what makes us tough? Maybe you don't let up very many points per game, right? That's when you can start to get into more measurable things. But yeah, they got to be. I heard one from, I can't remember the name, but it's a TED Ed talk, and it's one that is pretty popular and went pretty viral. And she said, if you can't measure it, it's not real. And that's paraphrasing. She might have used a little bit different language, but that was the premise. Is if it can't be calculated and measured and seeing, okay, did this happen? If that can't happen, then it's not real. There's just not there. It's not a thing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I like to wrap up every episode with what I simply call Motivation Monday. What is your piece of advice to all of our listeners out there who are getting their week started on their Monday morning?
I tell my students and, well, really I tell my players, mostly on the field, I use the word attack a lot. And I think that can be used in a lot of senses. I use that in the weight room a lot. I use that on the field a lot. Heck, I was just watching the basketball game, and I told one of the players that obviously also plays football that I have a good relationship with. I said, go attack the rim. Like, quit being passive. And so I think that can be translated into a lot of life, is just attack. Whatever you're going to do, whatever your next job is, whatever you got to go do at work that day, or your schoolwork, or that paper that you're dreading to write, that conversation that you're dreading to have with a parent or a significant other or friend, or whatever the hard thing is, or even whatever the good things are, go attack it and just be aggressive and go get it. Because if you go in there passive, or if you go in there with the wrong attitude, you're going to be in trouble. But if you attack it, like I said, with the 11 players running through the brick wall, if you got that, then you got a chance. And so, yeah, attack. Yep, we made that the word of the week in my first win at Cardington. My first win as a head coach, and our first win of
your
the
playoff
season,
win
obviously.
right there.
Well, no, so we played Cardington twice. So yeah, so the first win was at Cardington it was the second game of the regular season. And one of the biggest problems that we saw as coaches, obviously, from the players, is that they were just being passive. And granted, it was the first game, whatever, and we played a really good and tough team that first game. And so they were just being passive and just overthinking things and whatnot. And we told them, like, hey, listen, we tried to simplify this playbook for you. Like, just go attack. Like, know your job and just go do it. Attack. Nothing's going to be given to you. You have to go take it. and that worked. And we kind of just, that was like when we got a break after each drill or whatever. That was like our breakdown for probably 60+% of our breaks and stuff, because that was just what we wanted to instill, and it worked that week. And so we just kept it going. So yeah, attack.
Man, Cam, thank you for being on the podcast. It means a lot to me. We've had a lot of history together, starting back your senior year of high school really is kind of when it started. My sophomore year of high school, I was just the young pup. You kind of took me under the wing.
Youngin'.
Yeah, and then you King and Trace. Oh man, that group.
Yeah, I'd like to think I was maybe a little bit better influence on you than them, with
100%. But
their habits.
Hold on,
especially on.
Do we remember though my first visit to Ohio Wesleyan? King drove, and Trace was there, and they were my parents for the first visit to Ohio.
Oh, was that a game day visit?
It was a game day visit.
Yeah,
I sat with your parents. But yes, and then, that was the first night I met Jordan as well.
Oh goodness.
Yes,
they're fun. They're fun.
Oh, it was a great time. With that, that's a wrap on episode 12 of the Roughnecks podcast. Thank you, Cam, for joining the show. We definitely have to get together soon and catch back up.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Yeah, go attack.
With that, Roughnecks out.